Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to another edition. Hello there, Judy, Gary, Amy C. Hello there, Catherine. So,
Hello.
Rebecca. So, on a Wednesday evening, hello there, Tracy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Grizzly. How you doing, buddy?
Wonderful. Hello there, Lorna. So, what we got going on tonight?
Well, before we get into that, if you guys get an opportunity, my new video is out on YouTube. Check it out, Tracy and TTYL. Just kind of next time we're on, maybe give me a little feedback or something, or send me a note. Other than that, we have another paranormal investigator. You know, Grizz, we've had some really good guests on since we started this thing. You realize that?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, to me, it's been really interesting because I'm new to meeting all these people and discussing in this type of format. I'm not new to the field, but I'm new to the meeting of all these people, and I'm really proud, number one, to have met you and to be doing this with you.
Gonna make me blush.
Oh, baby. But we have a really good guy on tonight, Nick Millet. Hey, Nick, and I just let him explain who he is.
Yeah, I got his theme music propped up. Hey, there you go, Nick. So
I knew you were going to play that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's his theme song. It's always been his theme song. Welcome to the show. So introduce yourself and tell everybody all about you.
Well, obviously, my name's Nick Millet. I've been a paranormal investigator now for almost 19 years now, since I was 12 years old. And I have, man, I mean, the best way I could kind of short it up is that I've investigated like numerous different haunted locations throughout the country. Haven't gone international just yet, but we're working on it. Hello to everybody who's tuning in. I'm sure some of you guys remember me for a while back. Good to see you guys all again. But in addition to investigating, I've also done a lot of history research. That's actually one of my biggest roles when I go to these locations. I also do I also do a lot. I'm also a big guy on cryptids, ufology. I mean, I'm into almost everything in the paranormal field. And, you know, where things have been going for me now for, you know, almost 20 years. I mean, it's been quite an adventure. So, and still keeping it going.
Where are you located at, Nick?
I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
Okay. I'm down by St. Louis. I'm in Illinois too, so.
Oh, awesome.
I saw a couple places that in your list here that, you know, my wife and I, we did the Limp Mansion a couple of years ago in St. Louis. That was an interesting one, and not trying to take away from the total interview, but what'd you think about that place?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, we never really got to investigate it for very long because it was actually on the way back, but we got to look around the place, and that was when they had their special like breakfast / lunch they had there. But it was a really cool location, though. I mean, I'm hoping we'll eventually go back for a full night investigation, but we got to kind of check out the place, you know, for a few minutes at the very least. I mean,
okay, cool.
At the very least, say that I was there. So
yeah, if you can, I suggest getting one of the rooms there. They're really not that expensive, and if you get the combo room, that's where one of the owner's sons he killed himself in that room. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge like 15-foot tall ceilings and massive pocket doors that separate the two rooms. But that's the best way to go. And they'll let you hunt in there after they close at 10 o'clock at night. It's yours for the whole night.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, another team was in there when we did it. So we had two teams in there hunting. That was pretty cool.
Because I've been there before. Because when I was there, I wasn't able to go through all the rooms. So that was probably one of the rooms I missed out on. But like I said, I will return eventually.
Okay, well, sorry guys, I got a little off track there. Hey, so so 19 years, that's a long time. And, you're saying since you're about 12 years old, man, what you've had to have seen a lot of changes in the field, or have you seen a lot of changes in the field?
I think in a way, yes, because when I started getting involved in the paranormal field, because this was back in 2005, you have to remember at that time for starters, there was not as many paranormal groups as there are now. The only ones you really know about is if they were on television or if they had a website. That was pretty much it. So you couldn't, but you couldn't really communicate with them, obviously. So the only thing that you really had any known, I guess, any means by knowing a group was again from a lot of the television shows, and just to see where we are now, almost 20 years later, now we have paranormal groups and investigators from all over the world that I managed to discover myself. I'm not trying to take all the credit, but I've actually been going above and beyond more than a lot of other investigators. Because when you look at a lot of these paranormal groups and investigators, they're always more focused in throughout North America and Europe. You don't hear too very often, like from some of the other continents, like Central and South America, Africa, Asia, Australia. But for me, I wanted to try to really expand on it. And from what I've been looking at, some of these countries that have these investigators, they have really started getting involved in this stuff. And they basically want to be just like us. They want to have a lot of groups. There's even some paracons that are already in the works. In fact, two primary examples. In Central America, Costa Rica has had their own paracon, and also India has started to get involved with the paracons as well. So they've been growing like crazy, and I like to see who's going to be next. So we're growing to this very day.
That's awesome. It's great to see other countries getting involved in that. There's one gal, Grizz, that's on there every once in a while from Tokyo, if I remember right.
Irene. Yeah, I know who she is. Irene. Yep.
Yeah, and I guess I think at one point in time she said that it's almost taboo over there.
It is. I don't know if Irene knows this. I mean, I've only discovered only one other investigator out in Japan where I think he lives. I don't know if he's in Tokyo, actually. I think he's more southern Japan, if I'm correct. But I've only ever found she and this other guy are the only investigators I've ever found from Japan.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So 12 years old, right? You're saying you started getting stuff. Explain how you got into that, the whole mindset. What happened to you to think, oh my God, I got to get in this field?
Well, unlike most investigators who, like when you talk to a lot of investigators, like how they got involved, it's usually because of a childhood experience that they had when they were younger. That wasn't the case for me. For me, it was actually curiosity that brought me, because although I've been doing this for 19 years, there are some origins that go even further back. Growing up, when I was very young, I was introduced so before the age of 12, I was actually introduced to the X-Files back in the mid 90s, which, at that time, it was still relatively brand new and of course very popular. And not only did it, kind of got my attention, but I mean, not necessarily like quickly into the field. It also got me into the interest in the horror film genre. So I began to start watching horror films at a very young age, starting about 6 or 7, and going over. But again, that wasn't how. It got my attention, but it didn't necessarily get me into the field just yet. We fast forward a few years later, and I still remember this like yesterday. This was back when the Travel Channel only showed paranormal shows like on Friday nights, when it was actually fun to see this kind of, like, you were looking forward to it every week to see this. I just happened to be home, a few hours after school, just being like a typical kid, just changing the channel, finding something to watch. And then all of a sudden there's a show that gets my attention, which is a show called Most Haunted, which was like the dominant paranormal show the Travel Channel at the time. So we're talking pre-Ghost Adventures here, obviously. And I thought, oh, I wonder what this is. So it immediately grabbed my attention. I mean, I first thought it was just like your typical like horror type show, but I thought this looks different. So as I started seeing a lot more of this, I'm thinking, whoa, wait a second, like what is this? And it just completely, I don't know what it was. It was just like this lust or instinct in me that I thought, okay, this is something that looks actually really interesting. I definitely gotta get involved with it. I know I knew at that time that I knew I was not going to be able to jump to that chance immediately. It was definitely going to have to be a sit and wait type of situation, but eventually work my way up. So it was so in a better way to say it was mainly because of the paranormal television shows, and then the other thing too was there was another show that I used to watch, even before that, but I didn't really take it as seriously. It was just kind of more of like our Halloween show. It was this was from the early 2000s. I don't know if you guys remember the show's Scariest Places on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Blair. Yeah. That I remember I loved that show so much, but I didn't really think too much about the paranormal side of things. We just thought it was just a show that they often showed on Halloween. But fortunately, I know it's kind of hard to find now, but thankfully YouTube has a lot of these episodes that you can find. And it's always certainly nostalgic to kind of go back and kind of look at the origins of how I got into this field, because I don't believe without any of these shows I would ever have gotten into where I'm at today.
Yeah, I enjoy watching those shows. The ones now, America's Most Haunted.
Yeah.
Just flipping through streaming, and you see all these paranormal shows, not the ghost hunting shows, but just talking about the places, the history of them. That's, to me, I enjoy that. What about you, Grizz?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's what a lot of the paranormal shows from the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s were. At that time, it wasn't about collecting the best evidence. Those shows that they had, like there were other shows that thankfully somebody on YouTube has been uploading a lot of those. So you can actually go on YouTube and find these. One of my favorites was a series, again, on the Travel Channel called Haunted Hotels. And again, it wasn't investigations. It was like telling ghost stories. You brought the owners, witnesses, employees, guests, staff members, just set them to, have them sit together in separate rooms, interview them, tell them what they've experienced. I mean, tell you what they've experienced or what others have experienced. And that was it. And you just don't really see a lot of that as much anymore, because now, again, everyone's running around with the camera nowadays.
What is the caught on tape?
Paranormal caught on camera. Yeah.
That I think that's pretty cool to watch that, because we all know that a lot of that stuff can be debunked by video camera, stuff like that. But to me, it's still pretty cool to see it and to question yourself. Is that really happening? It's pretty neat. I like that show.
It's fun to watch, because yes, there are some videos that you could probably most likely debunk and actually later do turn out to be hoaxes. But there are some other videos on that show though that are kind of hard to debunk. So it's definitely a mixed type of paranormal show. So I definitely enjoy watching that a lot.
So you got through the whole, that you're building up. It sounds like as you're growing up, 12, 14, 15 years old, you're building up the nerve to actually think about getting into investigating. So what was your first investigation? If you don't mind, talk about what equipment you used. Where was it? What all did you do in there, and what made it stick with you?
Well, one of the first investigations I had, and now at this time, I was only 14 years old. And of course, obviously, because of my age, my chances of getting into a lot of places were rather limited, but I was able to go on part-time investigations. And one of the first investigations that I did, timers, I should have actually brought the digital recorder with, now that I'm thinking about it, because I still have it to this day, was we investigated this hotel in Colorado, which was, I believe it was either in Breckenridge or Leadville. I can't remember the name of the hotel. If I looked it up, I probably would remember. I just can't remember what it was now. We weren't able to really check out a lot of the locations, obviously, because, it was still an operating hotel, but we were able to check out the library. And it was more of a conference room, though, more than a library, honestly. And the equipment that I had, because again, I was relatively limited with equipment, because again, I was only 14 years old. I didn't work. And a lot of the equipment back in those days was very hard to get compared to now, which everybody's got a lot of this stuff now. So back then it was like everything was like $1,000 and over. So the only types of equipment I had, which I was able to, well, not necessarily afford, I was able to get them as Christmas gifts. I had the dowsing rods, had a pendulum, I had a crystal, they said digital recorder, I had a camera, picture camera. What else did I? Oh, I had the laser thermometer. I had an EMF meter. I had we had a video camera, but we didn't really use it too often because, again, we weren't there. We weren't at these locations for very long. But we just happened to walk around this place for just a few minutes, obviously. And, as usual, I expected nothing was going to happen. So when we got back to the car, I started listening to the audio recording, which surprisingly only lasted for maybe about a minute of record. Again, it was an old fashioned one. And as I'm listening to it, I thought I noticed that I captured some voice in the library from this hotel. Now, the only people that were in there were myself, my dad, and my brother. And we did talk a few times, but we didn't really do too much. But I heard this voice that even to this day, I still cannot necessarily, find out exactly what it's saying. But we knew it was I knew I didn't say it. My dad and brother didn't say it. So we couldn't explain that at all. It was certainly one of the strangest things. I thought, what better than, at only 14 years. Thanks, Eric. What better way than at only starting at 14 years old that you collect your first piece of evidence. I mean, it may be brief, but that definitely gives you a good start into the field. Again, as a 14-year-old.
You had a lot more equipment than I had at 35 years old.
Well, and here's the other cool thing too. It's definitely worth bringing up. It's not just for investigations, because I was 14 years old back in 2007. That same year, because I was just starting high school, I actually founded a paranormal club at my high school. And here's the cool thing. That club is still running to this very day, over 16 years later, 17 years later now. So I've created a legacy. So basically bringing new generations of paranormal investigators into the field.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm hoping one of these days to eventually make a visit. I just haven't been able to have the time, but soon. So I'm very proud from my former high school that they still got it. And they've been watching me too, because they had a page about, they told me, they mentioned a little bit about me, about I become like a full investigator. I'm thinking, geez, these guys are keeping an eye on me even after when I graduated.
Yes, I'm surprised they haven't asked you to come in and speak.
I'm surprised too. And yes, Tom McNicholas, I know you guys don't know him, but he's a very good friend of mine. He and I have gone on so many investigations over the last, 6-7 years now, Tom, and counting. So we got more investigations coming up.
Interesting.
No, that's awesome. So like you said, after 14, you got all that stuff going. Then you started getting into more, I'm assuming, more and more investigations. So where is one location that you've gone to that you're just like, not that you'll never go back, but it really got you, it scared you, or maybe frightened you enough to question the field?
The only one I could really think of that really frightened me for the most part was an investigation I had. It was at a residential location in downtown Chicago. And to make a long story short, because the actual story itself is very long, but we were only coming in just to really kind of do a cleansing and also kind of question the family members. They had kids at this house when we went in. I'm surprised they didn't send them somewhere else while we were doing this. And we only ever went to this location twice. So we have never got, not because we were scared to go back or anything. It's just that we never heard from that family again after the second time. So the first day that we were there, we were doing like, the ghost box session. We were doing, a number of different things. And then the second day, which was about a week later, where we actually, again, that's when we did the cleansing. But in my opinion, something went terribly wrong. And I want to be clear on things. I did not actually take part in this. I just happened to be a witness. So I witnessed a lot of this. But what was originally supposed to be nothing more than just a sage and cleansing, it actually ended up turning into an exorcism. And I'll tell you right now, it is one of the most unsettling things you could ever see in your life. I mean, when you see something like that and you see someone actually possessed, it changes you forever. You never look at things the same way again. And see, and I'm normally one of the investigators that avoids ever saying, demons or demonic possession at all times. But this particular one was really one of the few. And it was really it was one of those things I questioned myself thinking, all these other investigators and groups, maybe not everybody, but some of these other groups and investigators are always like hoping for demons and stuff like that. When you actually experience the real thing, there's nothing thrilling or exciting about it. You kind of almost regret, encountering something like that. It's not a pretty sight.
If I start seeing that, I don't know about you, Grizz, but I'm kind of turning the other way and going.
My faith is strong, and God is my staff, right? But I tell you, I don't know what I would do, but everybody would be getting wet. So, I can guarantee you that.
All right, so then, now thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's cool. I always like to hear the people tell what's happened to them, and especially the scary stuff, because people need to know out there that are listening that, you might go someplace and 2 or 3 years and never really experience anything other than a couple of EVPs or some good EMF or some SOS footage and stuff like that. But there might come a time when you're going to get scared out of your britches and you're going to be trying to get hold of somebody that can actually help you. So, and it sounds like that's what those people did before I having you come in. Now, I'm going to get into some of Grizzly Chris's stuff here now. Bigfoot shows that I'm from Illinois, right? I'm from by St. Louis. Bigfoot in central Illinois. First of all, where's that at? We're at in central Illinois.
So it hasn't been officially because again, I've only discovered from what I've seen online, but also with what I've been told. It was and ironically enough, Tom's been with us on this too. It was down in, Tom, help me out with this because I can't remember where it was called, but it was we were down for an investigate. We were down for like a small paracon that we had, and we actually had, believe it or not, Bobo from Finding Bigfoot with us. So it was quite an honor to actually meet one of the guys. Very nice guy, by the way. Certainly filled with a lot of humor. So great guy to hang out with. But they told us that they got reports of this certain area of the woods that we were at, and we were to actually go on a short Bigfoot hunts. So, and also, what better way to go on a Bigfoot hunt than actually go during the middle of winter? Normally, I don't do a lot of winter investigations, but when it comes to something like Bigfoot, I'm all for it because I think for finding Starved Rock. Thank you, Tom. It was in Starved Rock. So honestly, I think it's better to do that during the winter because you got all the snow on the ground. If there are footprints or anything, they're more easy to detect, compared to if you're doing it during the spring or summer when there's mud all around. So we went out for about an hour or two. Again, we weren't really able to be out there for too long. We weren't able to really gather any evidence, but here's the other cool thing that I did, because I actually provided this to the guest investigators that were with us. I gave them several little plastic bags, like zip bags. The reason I was giving those out was just in case. I mean, I said there's no guarantee that we're probably going to find anything, just in case if we find any hair samples. Because any hair samples that we find, yeah, most of the time it's probably nothing more than just wildlife, but it still can be very useful to eventually get it analyzed and see if maybe there have been truly Bigfoot sighted in that area. Unfortunately, as most hunts are, we didn't really find anything, but it was worth a shot though. We tried our absolute best.
Interesting.
What do you think about Grizz? You have you ever been to that Starved Rock?
No, I heard it's a good location.
Other than what supposedly is out in that area, it is a beautiful area because it's like basically like your hotel kind of out in the middle of the woods, but also out in the country too. It's pretty much right in the center of Illinois. But in my opinion too, I honestly think when it comes to like Bigfoot and in the state of Illinois, and you might actually know a little bit about this. I think there's a lot more Bigfoot activity down in southern Illinois compared to what we have up here. Because you got the big muddy monster, Murfreesboro mud monster down in Murfreesboro.
We just covered it on the show.
Yeah. I've actually done a show on it too. So there's a lot more activity down in the crescent of Illinois than over here.
Now, if you don't mind, both you guys just mentioned it, the Murfreesboro Monster.
Yeah.
What is that so people know on here?
So back in the 60s, a couple was making out at a boat ramp. Now, what makes this story interesting? The couple was married to other people.
Yeah.
And they had to go to the police station to file this report, and the police were like, "What in the hell?" And later, somebody claimed allegedly that it was some kind of guy in a costume with some stink spray. But however that may be, these sightings continued, and people are like, "Oh hell no, this thing was real." And still to this day, people are seeing this monster.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it was actually the early 70s because I remember it was June 25th of 1973. So the anniversary.
Is that what it was?
June 25th of 1973. They actually had, and a lot of people have been doing this with a lot of these cryptids nowadays. They actually had a Murfreesboro Mud Monster Festival in which Chad Lewis actually took part in. I think he just recently wrote a book about the monster. So it's but yeah, it was from the early 70s.
Yeah, so that's what got the police's attention when they found out this couple weren't a couple and they were actually married. And they actually sent a police forensic investigator out there, and they took photographs. And the guy was mad because he was up to his knees in mud taking photographs of these tracks because the town, through part of the town, was flooded. So, but it stirred up quite a thing, and it's pretty interesting. And I think there's a documentary on YouTube, or not Tubi.
Yeah, there is a documentary. There was only ever one other documentary. Well, not documentary, but a segment of it. It was featured on the show Monsters and Mysteries in America over 10 years ago. But now they actually made like a full documentary of it. And if that's not enough, when they had this Murfreesboro Mud Monster Festival last year, they actually created like a 7 to 8 foot tall statue on the monster. So just like what you see like either in the Pacific Northwest, or they may have a Bigfoot statue, or like you go to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, they got the Mothman statue. Now Murfreesboro has their own monster statue.
Oh yeah, that's cool. We're really not that far from there. Whenever we're on our next trip, we might have to swing by and check that out. That's cool.
I will tell you guys this because I know some people actually wonder like what the descriptions are. They say, from what I can remember, was it seems to be obviously some type of Bigfoot, a swamp monster, or a skunk ape type creature standing anywhere from 7 feet to 9 feet tall, weighing over 300 to 400 pounds. It's very muscular in appearance. It has these very long arms. The most unusual thing of this creature, which stands out from a lot of these other Bigfoot and skunk ape type creatures, is its fur color. We always hear all the time that it's either, we always hear they're usually either black, brown, reddish color, sometimes or gray. sometimes even have kind of like a greenish, like if they have grass on them. This one was actually white in color, but it was covered with a lot of this, mud and river slime from the nearby river. And the strangest thing is, most people have never actually seen the creature's face because it's covered in, with all this mud, twigs, weeds, and rocks. But they always said there was at least one or two features they would see. This creature often was said to have glowing red eyes, and sometimes yellow teeth were seen. And much like the skunk ape too, it also had, a very horrible odor. That was, one witness described it as a cross between a wet dog and a skunk. Its tracks that it leaves behind are, I think they were like well over like like about a foot long. I think they were huge.
Yeah, they were good size. I can't remember the dimensions. The documentary is pretty interesting. But one thing that I question, I could not document any fart spray or any skunk spray or anything like that back in the 70s. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have covered myself with stuff when I used to go hunting that would make you to attract deer. But they didn't have that stuff back then.
I don't think they did. And the other thing too, even former law enforcement officers that were involved in the case or are still alive today, they said anybody that tried dressing up to like do this as a prank was almost a death sentence. Because you have to remember, unlike up here, living in Chicago, down in southern Illinois, that's hunting country right there. Everybody's got guns. So
right. Virgil, look what Virgil put. That's his ex-wife. Virgil.
Well, the other thing too about this creature, and this is what you don't see with the typical Bigfoot, there was also reports of people who were out in the river area who were either jogging, walking, or like you said, parked by the side of the river, or just, hanging out, and they would either see or hear the creature. And it usually was in an aggressive situation, and it became a major vocal point for a lot of the studies, where literally it would attack any type of habitation where there were humans. So it was a very aggressive type of creature.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never heard of that one. That's cool. And I'm close to it.
Yeah.
If we get a missing persons case, I'm going to broadcast that on our true crime show. If Virgil ends up coming missing, I know who the suspect is, his ex-wife. But
so you had
it's pretty interesting. Go look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting.
That is. I think, did somebody say they wanted to know what the documentary name was? You
I put it out there for them.
Okay.
Yeah, the creature, I know they were asked to. It's called either the Big Muddy Monster or Murfreesboro Mud Monster. Another reason why it's called Big Muddy is not because it had a muddy appearance. There actually is a river called the Big Muddy River, which runs just outside of Murfreesboro, which is a tributary to the Mississippi River.
Yeah,
that's awesome. What? So another thing I've never heard of is melon heads.
I saw that with Tom. So,
man, did you all not see that one video since you brought that up? Nick, have you seen that? Where the dad goes out to the woods and he's filming and his kids are like, da, 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 da. And he's like, kids. And they're like, da, 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 da. And he swings the camera up and the melon monster is behind the kids and it just like runs and evaporates. And he's like,
really?
Kids! And And so the backstory on that video, because we brought that up on one of the shows, the backstory is kids have gone missing in this neighborhood the year before last, and they could not find them. And there's woods behind the house. And I don't know why the dad was filming. It was like a fall day or something. And the kids were playing in the wood. And man, it is creepy as all get out. And they trying to debunk this video. And that video is 100% perfect. It's not been altered. I don't know where it was published, and man, it is spooky as all get out. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you know what? I can't remember. I don't even remember if I ever heard about that video. So that's actually really interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up myself. To see what that's all about. But what the melon heads are, they're another type of cryptid, and yeah, Tom and I actually did try to investigate them too, although we couldn't get very far. They are just, funny name. But actually, in reality, they are said to be pretty terrifying creatures. They are described as being like these small beings with large bulbous heads that occasionally emerge from their hiding places to attack people. And there are so many different versions about the Melonheads that, there's just too many basically to really think which exactly is the truest one. But two of them stand out, however, and it started actually in Ohio. Both of them start a doctor by the name of Dr. Crow. He was working for the government and was, either working with radiation or working sometime during like the late 18, early 1900s, or during the Civil War, World War I, or during the Great Depression, or they say more recently, working during World War II. And his family, his children, his family, his wife became very ill. His children were all born mutated. The government did a cover up, gave him this nice piece of land out in Chardon, and said, hey, please keep quiet about this. Now, the second version is actually said to be a little bit more sinister, but is actually the most notorious story. Dr. Crow, again, but this time he was working at an orphanage or a hospital, and he was experimenting on children, primarily those who had hydrocephalus, water in the brain, as we all know. And these were vicious experiments, atrocities. And that's, you have to remember, unlike today where we have these group homes and orphanages for children, where they often have, like CPS or someone go in to check on them. Back then, they didn't have that. So nobody knew what was going on. So again, this doctor created basically like a bunch or a tribe, if you will, of these kids that became feral, animal-like, and they became cannibalistic and stuff. And we don't really know exactly what happened to the doctor, but apparently these the kids who managed to survive fought back against the doctor. They said that they actually murdered him, cannibalized him, then set the asylum on fire, or this building on fire. But we really don't know for sure. After the events of that, because you're kind of wondering, well, where do these creatures go from now? As the stories go, is that some of these most of them fled out into the nearby woods in where's I can't remember the name of it, but it's off Wisner Road.
That's where they made the movie The Hills Have Eyes.
And that's actually with what I was about to get to. That I think they're actually they became the inspiration for The Hills Have Eyes. But also, in addition, the story goes that after they've spent this time in the woods for so long, some of these individuals decided to leave the area just so they could get away from there. And as a result, not only have we still been getting sightings of these creatures in Ohio to this very day, but we also began getting reports and sightings of these creatures from the 1940s on in Michigan, Florida, North Carolina, Maine, and Connecticut especially, which, contrary to popular belief, they're not the same creatures, because they were people at one point, but these are now descendants, which they're said to be a lot more deformed in appearance due to inbreeding and cannibalism. The classic melonhead sighting, to kind of give a better description, is said to be smallish, about 3 to 4 feet tall, pale, large-headed, hairless individual with veins popping out of the head. They are said to make animalistic type sounds in order to communicate with each other. Either glowing or dark red eyes, razor sharp teeth, biped 2 legs, dirty clothes or stained clothing, usually stained with blood or other substances, or sometimes not having any type of clothing at all. Come to think of it, as a better way to describe them, I think they probably look a lot more than I think they probably would look a lot like what we think aliens look like. The grays, obviously. Now, many people have been chased out of those woods a lot, allegedly by melonheads, although most people claim that they never actually have seen a melonhead chasing them, just like a lot of these other cryptids. So what gets them to drive out to the area, investigate, and check out the area is what they believe to be a melonhead. But what chases them out of the woods and back into the car is anyone's guess. I mean, it seems sick and sad, but that legend persists to this day.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I saw that on there. I was like, well, what the heck is a melonhead?
I would say, for anyone that wants to investigate, definitely go with extreme caution, because like you said, Grizzly, there have been people who've disappeared. People have lost pets and stuff like that. Lone bikers, hikers, joggers, and even hunters have allegedly disappeared with almost no trace of them ever being found, except for maybe a bike or a backpack. And they often say they usually prey upon people who wander their territory. I think the most frightening thing about these creatures, more than anything else, unlike a lot of the other cryptids, is now that you guys know the story, the reality of them is that they weren't really monsters to begin with. You know, if you saw
Yeah.
one of these things, even with the horrific deformities they have, you could tell that at some point, you know, they were human and were driven underground in cannibalism and inbreeding.
No, great. That's a great great way to explain it, both of you guys. I appreciate that.
I just did a search for it, and a lot of articles came up from Ohio.
That's
Goes
correct.
back to the 70s. So there are documentation, but the video, Keeper True, seen the video I'm talking about? I cannot find it, but I saw it somewhere, and they validated the video because they tested it. And but I saw the backstory on that video, and we talked about that on another show. Because when we brought it up, everybody's like, "Well, was it real?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was real," because they couldn't debunk it because they said the video was untouched. Because the video, the dad didn't release the video; a family member did, and the dad, after that incident, ended up putting the house up for sale and moving. So
Right. I remember the town where they're supposedly seen. It's actually in the nearby town of Kirtland, Ohio, which is like a suburb of Cleveland. But one of the most notorious spots for the Melonheads is not in Ohio, but I said is in Connecticut. There's a road that runs through a wooded area near the town of Trumbull. And the road basically, for a lot of the people who live in the, you know, for people who live out, you know, out of the town, it's known simply just as oh my gosh, I just had the name of it basically. Velvet Street. That's what it was. For most people, it's known as Velvet Street. But for the locals and for ghost hunters and cryptid investigators, it's ironically nicknamed Dracula Drive.
go figure.
Yeah. Dracula Drive. All right.
Yeah, we tried doing a live video when we went to search for the Kirtland Melonheads. Unfortunately, we couldn't get very far because as we were driving on Wisner Road, you know, I'll be honest, I was actually nervous because I didn't know what we were going to expect from these. Because again, Melonheads stand out from a lot of these other cryptids. So when we got there, I was disappointed to see that there was like a gate that was in front, so we couldn't go any further. I thought, well, that's kind of odd because I've seen plenty of videos of people who've gone through that area to search for them. It turned out there's a bridge that goes through that throughout the road, which is also said to be a crybaby bridge, by the way, which I think a lot of us are familiar with. Unfortunately, that bridge got washed out by the river. So as a result of that, they had to fence off the area, not because of curiosity seekers, but for safety reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vampire Road, you got me on that one.
Yeah. Dracula Drive, that's the road to go.
Drive, yeah, Dracula Drive. All right, so thank you for talking about that. I appreciate that. That kind of got me a little bit wiser on the cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I kind of, you know, we're not your parent. So you're a member of the Midnight Paranormal Society from 2011 to 19. Then you formed a group in 18 called Illinois Paranormal Force, and now you are in Things Ghost Society. Can you speak a little bit about Things Ghost Society? Explain what's going on with them and what you guys do.
Yes. So the Things Ghost Society, that's obviously the most recent group that I joined now almost 2 years ago in 2022. That was a group that basically became the replacement, I guess, for myself to be part of a team, because the one that you just brought up, Illinois Paranormal Force, we were forced to disband because to kind of basically put it in simple perspective, a lot of the members were not being very cooperative, and I was getting really frustrated. So I was forced to close down the group, sadly. And obviously, I had to start looking for another team to join. So already I was part of the Things Network, which I'm also an active member, and am also one of the founding members too. And Jeremy York, you know, you guys know, he offered me if I wanted to actually become a member of Things Ghost Society. And I said, that would, at first I was kind of thinking, well, that would be great, but they live out in Indiana. And even though I'm not far from the Illinois-Indiana border, they live on the opposite side of Indiana. So it's a different story. But Jeremy, of course, said that, even if I lived in a different state, that I could still basically apply for membership. So I decided to take the offer because I wasn't sure how much further I was going to be able to go, because there were other groups I tried reaching out to, but there were some groups that said they already had enough members on their team. So searching for a particular group was difficult for the time being. So I ended up joining that. And then about a year later, which, was just really not that long ago, Jeremy and his team, they decided they wanted to start expanding and create chapters for other states. So although the Things Ghost Society had been around and it primarily focused on Indiana and some of the Midwestern states since 2009, I think it was about a year or 2 years ago already that the first chapter outside of Indiana was formed, which was Things of Colorado. So, which is ran by Adrian Clayton. And then Jeremy offered if I'd be interested in wanting to have a chapter for Things of Illinois. And at first I was a little bit reluctant because, again, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to be expecting, but I just decided to take the offer. So Things of Illinois was formed. And funny enough, not long after my chapter formed, a number of other chapters were created. Next, we had Things of Missouri, ran by Carl Albertson. We have Things of Wisconsin now, ran by Joe, who runs the Mark Joe Show. And we also have 3 international chapters in Europe. We got Things of United Kingdom, which is ran by Vivian. Things of Ireland, ran by Jenny. And also Things of Netherlands, ran by Mary J. Williamson. So in total, there are 8 chapters of us, which most likely chance we're probably going to be growing more probably throughout this year.
That's very awesome.
Yeah.
So behind you, the Nick Files. I have actually heard of that. I've actually tuned in a few times here or there. You're the host of that, but you're also a co-host of looks like 4 other shows: Fear Fans, To the Grave, and Back, To the Grave and Back, Supernatural Talk, and The Frighteners. That's pretty cool that you have all those shows, and Grizz does tons of shows as well. So I guess the question for both of you, I enjoy doing this once a week with Grizzly, right? I really do enjoy it because he's a great guy, and I enjoy talking about it. But man, I just don't have the time other than the one. How do you guys, both of you, how do you guys continue to feel as though you're keeping it fresh and keeping everything enlightened, moving forward with every show?
I honestly think every show has some difference to it compared to the last one. So I'll start off with my show, because since I'm the host of Nick Files, my show is relatively unique because I do something that, as far as I know, no other paranormal podcast has been doing this. I mean, again, I'm not trying to take credit or anything. It's just the facts. I just don't know of any other shows who does what I do. And what I do for the Nick Files is, you guys have seen, is that I create presentations of different haunted locations in historic locations, as well as also cryptids too. I've been starting to kind of expand on that as well. And it's more of an educational kind of means for the most part. What I've done with the show lately is I've actually been taking it in a very different direction, because even for the shows that don't do what I do, we always focus on a lot of the most notorious haunted locations. Again, a lot of the TV shows do that too. Again, not like what it was 15, 20 years ago. So for me, what I've been doing is I've been kind of focusing on a lot of the more lesser known locations. And again, I say historic too, because not all these places I present are said to be on. Hey, Nikki, good to see you from Australia. So she's actually one of the crew members we have on the show, Fear Fans. So it's definitely great to see you. So my show really has so much more difference that Yeah, see, like what Eric said. I always have a lot of facts in story form, and I present places that, whether they're haunted or not, nobody's ever heard of these locations. So that's what makes my show more productive, and what's made me continue keeping going with the show. As long as people are enjoying it, even if I even said at one point, if I even had just one viewer just watching or even just listening to the show, then that means that I've done something right for putting something like this together. And I'm looking forward to doing season 3, which currently I'm on hiatus with the Nick Files as well as a few other shows because I've been doing the show for several months. I desperately need a break, and also the amount, all of the work that was put into these slideshows, it's very time consuming. So I've been also trying to focus on other projects I need to work on before I get back onto the Nick Files. So it's a lot of work to put together for these slideshows, but in the end, it's totally worth doing.
That's pretty cool.
I know Grizzly stuff. When I tune into his stuff, it's cool that he goes over a realm of different topics throughout his podcast. So I find that really interesting, and to me, it's nice to see that it's not just the same show every time he comes on, right? It's always very, very interesting, and he keeps it up to date, and really it's entertaining. And Grizzly's a funny guy, and he asks good questions and all that stuff. So, you had a question on there about Michigan, didn't you, Grizz?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I looked right over it and I had my big mouth open.
Oh, you're fine. So Ryan wants to know, has Nick ever investigated in Michigan? If so, whereabout?
I have not, unfortunately, but I've been wanting to get up to Michigan for the last few years. So, although I will tell you guys this, and this actually involves kind of another cryptid story, but it was not involving myself. My dad's side of the family used to own a piece of or you can say my grandparents, they used to own a piece of land up in New Buffalo, Michigan. And that back in the 60s and 70s, that was like my dad's and his family's retreat where they went for the summer. And unfortunately, the house doesn't exist anymore. It was torn down like over 40 years ago, back in the 80s. But sadly, we no longer legally own that piece of land. But when I was still in high school, my dad actually used to take me over to that area for camping. Now, my dad told me a story about something that to this day we still can't explain what it is. I've never really told this story very often, not because I don't want to. It just never comes up sometimes. I believe this involved my great grandmother, and this was back in the early 1940s. And she was sitting outside the porch, I believe, I think it might have been one of my uncles, which at that time he was only a baby. And I'm hoping I'm saying the story correctly because it's been a long time. And they're sitting out one day, and all of a sudden they start hearing some noise in the nearby woods. So, my grandmother, my great grandmother, like anybody, like who has a baby and thinks it's like a type of wildlife, she's having all this excitement. She wants to show the baby what it could be like if it was probably like a deer or something like that. It was only when the thing stepped out of the tree line that she was frozen still. I still don't know exactly how to really describe it, but the figure looked humanoid, but it was clearly not a human being. She later described it as almost like a pencil woman. This thing had to have been at least about, if not for the fact this thing I would speculate, it must have towered to at least over 10 feet tall, even its hunched position. It might have seemed almost frail. And she said the thinness of its body and the emaciated, caved-in quality of its chest reminded her of a starving animal. So, but still, this thing was undeniably just out of place. And she watched as it walked up towards a certain path before walking on another. Before it left, it actually looked toward the farmhouse. And she said she felt its eyes peek. And this was in the broad daylight, by the way. This was not at nighttime. And the last thing she remembered was this creature or whatever it was started walking over towards her. She was so frightened by what she saw that she actually fainted with the baby still in her arms. And she was only unconscious for just a few minutes. And when she came to, whatever it was gone. There was no markings
That's
or anything
crazy.
like it.
Yeah.
And to this day, we still don't know. Yeah, it's like that's probably the best way I could describe it. It was like one of the praying mantis type people, the insectoids, as they call them.
Wow.
Wow.
I still don't know what it is. We actually spoke with, because one of the most world-renowned cryptozoologists, if you guys have heard of Lauren Coleman, who's been on a lot of these, cryptid documentaries. We actually had the honor of meeting him at the Mothman Festival a number of years ago. And my dad actually told that story to Lauren, see if we can get some idea of what it could have been that my great-grandmother would have seen back in the early 40s. His answer to that, and this was probably the best thing he could come up with, because even he couldn't really understand himself, was a creature known as the Grinning Man, or what was known as Indrid Cold. It was a type of phenomenon, like an extraterrestrial type creature that was seen right around the same time as the Mothman sightings out in West Virginia. So could it have been the same type of creature? I have no idea. But that was also one of the best answers that we can get from, again, one of the most world-renowned cryptozoologists.
Wow.
And to answer her question, no, unfortunately, she never drawed. But she said, but they did try searching for any evidence. But like most of these cryptids, and then actually, no, before I even say that, no one else ever reported seeing this creature throughout the area. So it was really strange what she saw. And we still can't explain it to this day, over 80 years later after it occurred. So the fact that the creature that they were trying to search for any type of evidence for was never found.
Interesting.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Real quick, if you wouldn't mind, you're a horror film director.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a couple minutes about that?
Yes, it's actually been hold on one second. Sorry, the audio was my audio was getting a little bit behind. Now it's back to normal. So I haven't really done any films in the last number of years, but I actually did direct a documentary, which was my directorial debut, which was called 25 Scariest Movie Moments. And what it was obviously documenting the 25 most frightening movie moments of all time. Now, to let everyone know, you're not going to see a lot of the familiar films like, we often associate with, because it's actually a fan-made sequel to a number of documentaries that have been made over the years, which actually began back in 2003. The UK made this documentary, which is hard to find, but fortunately I got a copy of it, called The 100 Greatest Scary Moments, which, detail different movies, even music videos, television documentaries, even cartoons were featured in it. But then a year later in 2004, the US made their own version, which you can find on YouTube, called The 100 Scariest Movie Moments, which was followed by 2 more sequels. Several more documentaries were made over the years. So in a way, this documentary is a fan-made sequel to a lot of these ones. And because it was made later, compared to like a lot of these other ones that were made, it's basically a sequel of movies, a list of movies that didn't quite make it to all these other lists, or movies that recently came out. And it took me about 5, I'm not going to lie, it took me about 5 or 6 years for me to complete the entire film.
Interesting.
So it was a lot of work. And believe it or not,
Yeah,
I'm actually going to be going back and hopefully to re-release it in the future, because we did get I did have a limited theatrical release at a Paracon. And it's kind of weird when you watch your own film from a director's standpoint. You start looking at certain pieces of footage that sometimes you just realize you just don't need anymore, because unfortunately I couldn't get a lot of the volunteers to come back out to check out the movie. So there were certain guests that I had that I thought, I don't think I need these people anymore. I couldn't even get a hold of them. What's the point of even keeping them on? And also the film, is extremely long. It's supposed to be a mini series, but the exact length of it, it's about a 3.5 hour film. And that was not with what I was originally intending. So I'm hoping to eventually, when I have the time to do this, is to eventually go back and remove certain unnecessary footage. And I'm hoping to eventually turn it into an 1.5 hour film. So, because again, there was just no point. And when I started making this film, and this was the majority of those, which was not surprising, a lot of them couldn't make it, was now originally this was going to be a movie made primarily for like high schoolers and teenagers. Because since this was over a decade ago, I was originally going to recruit just like kids and teens, like anywhere between the ages of like 13 and 25, you know, because I wanted to give it that demographic. But at the very last minute, I decided to include older guests onto the show, onto the documentary as well, including other investigators, including those that was part of the Midnight Paranormal Society at the time. It's because I wanted to then apply it for older audiences. Because if you have older people involved, you got people who can say, well, because I included a few older movies, people who may have grown up or remember when those movies came out. They say, well, I remember when this originally came out, like back in the 60s, that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty intense film, but like I said, eventually I will be going back and re-releasing it. But I always tell everybody, if you want to see it, you got to see all the other true documentaries that were made before mine, because mine's a fan-made sequel.
Gotcha. Yeah. What do you think, Grizz?
Awesome. So how do people find you?
So I'm pretty much all over the place, but for anybody that wants to find me, you can just find me simply on Facebook, you know, my personal profile, but you could also find me on Things Network. And one other thing, I mean, the fact that my show's been so successful, it's actually gotten the attention of other networks that I'm on. So although Things Network is the primary network that I'm on, you could also find me on Temple of Phoenix, Pack Channel, Temple of Phoenix Rising Entertainment, Skeleton Key Network, Simply Spooky Network, Para-Unity Network, BB3 TV, It's Haunted Network, and I feel like I'm missing one more, but
RU Media Network.
Yeah, RU Media Network. That's the one. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, 9 o'clock tonight, Bigfoot shuts down a highway. Also, we have a hunter coming on record telling his Bigfoot encounter. I found his video. We're going to show that tonight, thanks to somebody. And his story is amazing. It turned his world upside down. So tune in for 9 o'clock tonight. We're going to talk about that. Thank you, Nick. Like always, here's your exit theme song. So, glad to have you. Glad to see you. And we'll see you at 9 o'clock. Take care, Nick. See you, Tracy.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.